I've never been the type to spiral into paranoia, but looking back, there were signs. Sarah had always been a little bitchy, quick to snap when things didn't go her way, but lately there was this weird edge to her. She'd snap at me for no reason, then get all defensive when I asked if something was wrong. I chalked it up to stress from her job. She's in marketing, always on deadlines, always bitching about her boss. Still, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling that something was off. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was stable. We'd been together for 6 years, married for 3, and I'd always believed we had a good thing going. I trusted her. Or at least I thought I did. She's the kind of person who can be charming in public but has a sharp tongue behind closed doors. I remember her telling me she was working late the night she started acting weird. Her phone was always glued to her hand more than usual, and she'd brush me off when I asked to see her messages. Little things, but they added up. One afternoon, I was messing around with the security footage from our house because I had a sneaking suspicion she was sneaking around. We have a pretty high-tech setup, cameras everywhere, remote access, all that security system stuff. I had been tinkering with it to get some clarity on her behavior, and that's when I noticed something strange. There was a new device connected, an unknown remote monitoring station I'd never set up. It was sort of hidden in our home network, and apparently, someone had been controlling it remotely. I immediately felt my stomach drop. Who the hell is connecting to my security system? I went through the logs, and that's when I saw the IP address. It was coming from this place I'd never heard of, an obscure server located in a city a few states away. That's when I started digging deeper. I pulled up all the network activity logs, and there were timestamps, late nights, weekends, when Sarah would be claiming she was working late or out with friends. But the IP logs showed otherwise. Someone was using our security cameras, monitoring our property remotely. My hands started trembling. I suddenly felt sick. I kept staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing, and that's when I realized. My drone surveillance system, which I'd purchased for extra border security on our property, had also been accessed. I remember setting it up with my partner, Mike, who's an expert in remote monitoring tech. We'd been working on the system for months, fine-tuning it, making sure it could give us real-time feeds from the border in case of illegal crossings. I trusted Mike. We'd been friends for years. Apparently, Sarah was using the same remote stations to get into my drone system. That's when it hit me. She was cheating on me, and somehow she was doing it with Mike. I couldn't believe it at first. I mean, how? Why? I knew Sarah wasn't exactly a saint. She was bitchy, she lied, she manipulated, but to think she'd cheat with my own partner, that was next level. I spent the night replaying everything, trying to piece it together. She'd always had a sharp tongue, but she'd also been so good at hiding things, at lying convincingly when it suited her. I remember catching her in a small lie about her working late, and now I realize she was probably out doing God knows what with Mike. My mind kept circling. Back to those late-night visits she claimed were work. The eyes rolling, the sneaky texts, the quick excuses. I trusted her, yeah, but maybe I was just too blind to see what was really happening right beneath my nose. I felt angry. Betrayed doesn't even cover it. It's like my whole world caved in that moment. I thought about all the times I'd been there for her, supported her through her stressful days, helped her with her projects, even cleaned up after her bitchy tantrums. And she was out there with Mike, probably having sex, lying straight to my face. It was a sickening thought. I've always been straightforward. If I'm going to get cheated on, I want to know. I just didn't expect it to be with someone I trusted so much. So I kept gathering evidence. I downloaded logs, screen recordings, everything I could find. I wanted to be sure before I confronted her. I knew I'd have to face her eventually, but I needed proof. I planned to catch her off guard, the moment she thought she was safe, that she could keep lying. I had no idea what I'd say or what I'd do when that moment came, but I knew I couldn't stay in this limbo anymore. That night, lying alone in bed, I kept thinking about the betrayal, the sudden gut-wrenching sense that my entire relationship was built on lies. And I realized I was beyond hurt. I was furious. I don't know what I was expecting, honestly. I thought I knew this woman, and now I see I was fooling myself. I had to decide what to do next. Whatever it was going to change everything. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding head and a heavy weight I couldn't shake. The evidence was clear now. Sarah had been sneaking around, using my drone surveillance system to meet up with Mike, and probably more than just a few times. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut all over again. The betrayal wasn't just about the cheating. It was about the trust I thought we shared, shattered into a million pieces. I stayed in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I was going to do. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, lay everything out on the table and see her squirm. The other part, the colder part, told me to plan carefully. I knew if I went in guns blazing, I might say something I'd regret, and I needed to be smart about this. I decided I'd wait until she came home that evening when I could have some control over the situation. Throughout the day, I kept replaying everything. I kept checking the logs, making sure I wasn't missing anything. I even set up a new alert system on the security feed, so I'd be notified the second she tried to access anything. I wanted her to know I was onto her. Part of me wanted her to feel the weight of being caught, but another part just wanted to know how deep this went. How long had this been going on? Was it just with Mike, or was there more? I also reached out to Mike, surprisingly calm. I didn't want to blow up just yet. I just told him I knew about the remote monitoring, about the connection to my drone system, and that I'd be talking to him later. I kept it cold, professional. No accusations, yet. I needed to know how far this went, how long they'd been doing this, and what their plan was. As the day went on, I watched Sarah's routines. She left work early, which wasn't like her. Usually she'd stay late working on some project, but today she was out the door by 4 p.m. I kept my phone on silent, waiting for her to come home so I could finally get some answers. When she finally arrived, she looked annoyed, like she knew she'd been caught but was trying to act like everything was fine. I greeted her at the door and she shot me a quick, fake smile. "Hey," she said, brushing past me, her tone dismissive. I blocked her path gently and looked her in the eyes. That's when I saw the flicker of something, nervousness maybe, or guilt. I didn't say a word at first. I just pulled out my phone, showing her the logs. I played the recordings of her accessing the system late at night, the IP addresses, the timestamps. Her face went pale. "You've been screwing around," I said plainly, voice low but steady. She stared at me, lips trembling, then threw her head back and laughed. The kind of laugh that drips with disdain. "Oh, please," she snapped. "You really think I'd do something that stupid? That's just some tech glitch or whatever. You're overreacting as usual." I didn't buy it. This was her classic move, deny, lie, spin. I was sick of it. I told her I didn't believe her and that I knew she'd been using my drone system to meet Mike. Her eyes darted away and she started crying fake tears, trying to play the victim. "You don't understand," she said, voice trembling. "Mike and I, it's just sex, okay? It's not like I love him. I just needed someone to feel good with, you know. Maybe you're too busy with your stupid security system to notice what's really important." That was when I lost it. I'd never felt so furious, so betrayed. How could she just brush it off like that? Like it was nothing. Her bitchy attitude, her lies, it all just boiled over. I told her I wanted her out, that I'd had enough of her bullshit. She kept crying, claiming she was sorry, that it was just a mistake, that she didn't mean for it to go this far. But to me, that was just more bullshit. She was a master manipulator, always has been. The emotional impact hit me hard. I went from initial shock to intense anger, then to sadness I couldn't quite understand. I'd loved her once, or so I thought. Now I just felt numb. The trust was gone. The woman I married, who I thought was my partner, had been betraying me in the worst way possible, using my own technology to cheat behind my back. It felt like my entire world was collapsing. I told her to pack her things and leave. She tried to argue, to beg, but I just couldn't listen anymore. I felt a mix of rage, heartbreak, and resentment all at once. I wanted her to feel the pain, to understand what she'd done. I didn't want her to beg for forgiveness, at least not right now. I just wanted her out of my life. I spent the next few hours cleaning out the room she'd been staying in, tossing her clothes into a bag. She kept crying, insisting she'd change, promising she'd stop seeing Mike, but I didn't believe her. I knew better now. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who lied and cheated without remorse. I felt like a fool. That night I sat alone, staring at the remnants of my broken marriage. I kept thinking about how I'd let myself be blind to her true nature all these years, how I'd trusted her when she'd been lying right in front of my face. And I realized that revenge, no matter how satisfying in the moment, wasn't going to fix what was broken. But it did make me realize I had to take control, make some changes, start rebuilding my life from the ground up. And so I decided this was the end of the line. No more excuses, no more lies. Just me, figuring out how to move forward without her. After she left that night, I sat there in the dark, feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train. It wasn't just the betrayal that twisted inside me. It was the shock, the anger, and a strange sense of relief. I finally knew the truth, and even though it hurt like hell, I also felt a strange clarity. I spent the next day trying to process everything, going through all the evidence again, making sense of how deep her lies had gone. The worst part was realizing how much I'd been blind. I remember all those little moments, her snapping at me, the late nights, the weird excuses she threw out. I'd always thought she was just stressed or busy, but now I saw she was actively hiding something. It made me question every moment we'd shared. How many times had she lied? How many moments had I missed? I felt like a fool for trusting someone who had been lying to me right in my face. That morning, I reached out to Mike. I needed to hear his side, even if I already knew the answer. I sent him a simple message. "We need to talk, I know about everything." I was calm, more curious than angry at that point. I didn't want to blow up until I was sure of what I was walking into. When he responded, he was surprisingly straightforward. He apologized, said he'd been suspicious of Sarah for a while, but he didn't think she'd go this far. He claimed he never meant to hurt me, that he'd been just as blindsided when he found out I knew. Yeah, right. We arranged to meet the next day at a quiet coffee shop. I needed to see him face to face. I wanted to hear the truth from him directly. When we met, I was already angry, but I kept my cool. I told him I'd found out she'd been accessing my drone surveillance system, using it to meet him, possibly more. I asked him how long this had been going on. He looked down, took a deep breath, and told me they'd been seeing each other for about 3 months. He said he thought it was just sex, nothing serious, and that he didn't tell her to do any of this. That she contacted him and they just fell into this pattern. I felt a cold wave run through me. It was like I'd been punched again. I couldn't believe I was hearing this. She'd been lying to me for months, and now I was hearing that Mike didn't even want to be part of anything serious. I wanted to punch something but kept it together. I told him I appreciated his honesty, but I also made it clear I had no intention of keeping any friendship with him. The betrayal was too deep, and I didn't want that kind of person in my life anymore. That conversation set the tone for what came next. It was time for me to figure out what I really wanted. Did I want to try to fix this mess? Or was it better just to walk away completely? Honestly, I was exhausted from the betrayal, but part of me still clung to hope. Hope that I could salvage what little was left of my dignity, my self-respect. I told myself I deserved better than someone who would betray me with my own partner and technology. Later that day, I started planning how to move forward. I changed all my passwords, secured my devices, and disconnected the drone system from the internet temporarily. I didn't want her or anyone else sneaking back in. I also reached out to a lawyer just to get advice about what my options were if I decided to divorce. I wasn't rushing, at least not yet, but I knew I had to prepare myself for what was coming. Throughout all this, I kept replaying the moment I found out, trying to understand how I missed all the signs, how I let her manipulate me into thinking everything was fine. I wondered if I'd ever trust again or if I'd always be looking over my shoulder. It's strange how betrayal can turn your world upside down overnight. I felt numb most of the time, but there was also this fire inside, an urge to do something to make her pay in some way. Not just for the affair, but for shattering what I thought was stable. As I sat alone in my living room that night, I realized I had a lot of rebuilding to do. The first step was accepting that this chapter was over, that I was going to have to start from scratch and learn how to trust again, if that was even possible. I didn't want to be bitter forever, but letting go of her was the only way forward. I told myself I'd be okay, that I'd come out of this stronger. Still, I knew the scars wouldn't fade quickly. This kind of betrayal leaves a mark, one I wouldn't forget anytime soon. The days that followed were a blur of planning and emotional fallout. I kept going over everything in my head, trying to piece together how I'd missed the signs, how I'd let her manipulate me into thinking she was just stressed or busy. The betrayal cut deep, but I realized I was also angry at myself for being so blind. Trust is a fragile thing, and I felt like I'd handed her my trust on a silver platter, only to have her toss it right back in my face. I spent most of that week securing my digital life, changed all my passwords, enabled two-factor authentication everywhere, and disconnected the drone system entirely. I also pulled out all the footage from the security cameras, saved it on a separate drive, just in case. I knew she might try to come back, maybe pretend she was sorry or that it was all a big mistake. I wasn't falling for that. I wanted to be ready. I also contacted a divorce lawyer. Not that I was rushing to file immediately, I just wanted to understand my options. The idea of splitting up after everything was almost unbearable, but I knew staying in a marriage built on lies would only make me miserable in the long run. I didn't want to be some fool who stayed because of comfort or fear. I deserved better, and I was determined to start carving out a new life for myself. Meanwhile, Sarah tried to reach me a few times. First, she sent me a bunch of texts, mostly crying, begging me to forgive her, saying she was sorry, that she didn't mean for any of this to happen. Her words were typical. She blamed the stress, said she was lonely, that she still loved me but made a mistake. Honestly, I couldn't even look at her messages without feeling a mix of revulsion and pity. I knew her game. She was good at guilt tripping, at making herself the victim. But I saw right through it now. Her tears weren't going to fix anything. One evening, I finally responded. I told her I needed space, that I was hurt, but that I'd think about everything. I also made it clear I wasn't interested in any excuse, just wanted her out of my life. Her response was an angry tirade, accusing me of overreacting, calling me paranoid, saying I was just jealous and insecure. That was classic her: deny, deflect, blame. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew what I saw, and I knew what she was capable of. During all this, I started reaching out to some friends, people I could trust. I needed to talk about what had happened, even if it was just to get some perspective. Surprisingly, I got a lot of support. They told me I was right to be furious, that I deserved better than someone who would betray me like this. It was comforting to hear that, but it still didn't make the pain go away. I felt like I was constantly walking this tightrope, trying to stay composed while my insides were falling apart. One night I caught myself staring at the empty space where she'd used to sleep. It hit me hard. Everything we'd built, all the memories, the plans for the future, they felt like a lie now. I wondered if I should try to fight for the marriage or just cut my losses. Honestly, I was exhausted. Every time I thought about her, I felt this deep ache inside: anger, sadness, frustration. How could someone I loved so much turn out to be such a liar? How could I have missed the signs? Then I remembered something she'd said early in our relationship, how she'd always been the one to manipulate, to lie, to get what she wanted. I think I'd ignored it all. Back then, convinced it was just her personality. Now I saw her for what she truly was: a bitchy, lying, manipulative woman who used her charm to hide her true nature. The realization made me even more determined to leave her behind. I owed her nothing now, not forgiveness, not explanations, not a second chance. So I made a decision. I was going to take my time, get everything in order, and then file for divorce. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I'd probably have years of emotional healing ahead of me. But I also knew that staying would only make me more miserable, more broken. I didn't want to keep living in a lie. I wanted to rebuild, stronger, wiser, more guarded. Lying in bed that night, I looked around my house, feeling an odd mixture of emptiness and liberation. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I was done being the victim of her lies. Whatever pain I had to go through now, it was better than living in a constant state of distrust and betrayal. I promised myself I'd come out of this smarter, tougher, and more aware of the kind of person I'd never let into my life again. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal consultations, packing, and emotional upheaval. I immersed myself in sorting out the mess that was my life, trying to keep my sanity intact amid the chaos. Every day felt like a roller coaster, swinging between anger, heartbreak, resignation, and a strange sense of relief that I was finally taking control. I knew she was still trying to reach out, but I kept my distance. I refused to let her manipulate me anymore, even though part of me still wondered if she truly understood what she'd lost. I finally decided to file for divorce. I wanted it done clean and quick, so I gathered all the necessary documents, talked with a lawyer, and filed the papers. The whole process was exhausting, emotionally draining, but I was determined to move forward. I knew deep down that I had to cut all ties, erase her from my life, and start healing. The betrayal had cut so deep that I realized I couldn't stay in a relationship with someone who'd do this to me, no matter how much I loved her once. During this period, I started to rebuild my life from scratch. I changed my passwords again, secured my home and work networks, and even uninstalled the drone system altogether. I didn't want her or anyone else sneaking into my digital world anymore. I also started focusing more on myself, hiking, working out, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected. I needed to remind myself what life was like before all this crap started. It wasn't easy, but every small step forward made me feel a little stronger. Of course, she tried to worm her way back in. I'd get the occasional text, mostly crying or begging for another chance. "Please, I was wrong," she'd say. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." But I knew better now. Her words were just more lies, more manipulation. I didn't respond to most of her messages, and when I did, it was only to set clear boundaries, nothing more. I was done playing her game. Whatever connection we had was forever broken, and I refused to be the fool again. One day, I decided to have a final talk with her. I told her I was done, that I wanted nothing more to do with her. I explained how deeply she'd betrayed me, how her lies had shattered everything I believed in. I told her that her constant lies and manipulations weren't just about cheating. They showed her true character, and I didn't want someone like that in my life anymore. She argued, of course, called me paranoid, accused me of overreacting, but I didn't care. I knew the truth, and that was all that mattered. The aftermath was brutal. I felt liberated, but also empty. I'd lost someone I once loved, and that pain lingered. But I also knew I had gained something: clarity. I saw her for what she really was, a selfish, bitchy woman who used me and my trust for her own gain. That realization hurt, but it also freed me from her grip. I promised myself I wouldn't let this define me. I'd rebuild, stronger, wiser, and more cautious with whom I trusted. Looking back now, I see how much I've grown. The betrayal forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, but it also made me realize my own strength. I learned to listen to my instincts and trust myself more. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone in a similar situation, it's this: don't ignore the signs and never stay in a relationship out of fear or comfort. You deserve honesty and respect, and if someone betrays that, you owe it to yourself to walk away. It's not easy, but it's necessary. Because in the end, your own happiness and integrity matter more than any false relationship or fleeting comfort. I'm still healing, but I know I'll get through this. I have to. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything that's happened, I realize how much this experience has changed me. I used to think love meant blind trust, but now I know better. Love, real love, is built on honesty, respect, and boundaries. When those are broken, it's not just a betrayal of vows, it's a betrayal of who you are. I've learned the hard way that sometimes the only way to reclaim yourself is to walk away from what's broken beyond repair. I won't lie. There are days when I still feel the sting of her betrayal. I catch myself thinking about her, about what could have been, and then I remember what she did. I remember the lies, the manipulations, the way she used my trust as if it was nothing more than a tool for her own pleasure. That pain is real, but it's also a reminder. A reminder that I have the power to choose myself over someone who doesn't value me. In the end, I've come to understand that revenge isn't about getting even. It's about reclaiming your dignity. I didn't need to do anything grand or malicious. I just needed to take back control of my life. Cutting her out, protecting my digital space, and making the decision to start over, that's been my form of justice. It's about saying to myself, You are worth more than the lies she told or the trust she betrayed. I've learned to be more cautious, more aware of the signs of manipulation, and more vigilant about protecting myself. I've also learned that forgiveness isn't always about forgetting. It's about letting go of the anger that eats you from the inside. I don't forgive her for what she did, not yet, but I forgive myself for trusting blindly. And I forgive myself for the pain I let fester longer than I should have. Most importantly, I've realized that life doesn't stop just because someone else chooses to betray you. You have the power to rebuild, to move forward, and to find happiness again, even after the worst kinds of betrayals. It's a long road, and I know I'll carry this scar for a while, but I also know I'm stronger for it. So here's my final word of advice. Trust yourself first. Don't ignore the signs. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. And if they betray that trust, don't be afraid to walk away. Because at the end of the day, your peace and integrity matter more than any fleeting moment of false love or comfort. I've learned that the hard way. Now I'm just focusing on rebuilding my life, one step at a time.